Welcome to the ABOP podcast. ABOP is the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, a nonprofit organization that focuses on mentoring future generations of Black percussionists. My name is Raynor Carroll. I am an ABOP founder and the former principal percussionist with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Thank you for joining me on this podcast, episode 35, Timpani Maintenance Talk. My guest to once again talk shop with is Damion Frigillana. Damion, welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back, Raynor.
Well, thanks for coming back to do this episode and all you do for ABOP.
Thank you.
To those that may have missed it, Damion and I talked maintenance for orchestral percussion instruments in episode 28, so please check it out. Now we are devoting this entire episode to timpani. But let me begin with two important notes to our listeners. Make sure to check out the program notes on the podcast page of our website for additional helpful information. And secondly, ABOP, Damion, and I have not received any resources from any manufacturer to help sponsor this podcast. Any company or product we mention isn't an endorsement, but rather a suggestion as something you might consider. We encourage you to use your own judgment to figure out what's best for you. We're sharing some details as a guide and a possible starting point in your process. So we're not just talking timpani, we're going to talk some of the accessories that go along with that, because that's very important. But the areas we will cover include, and it's a lot, tuning devices, mallets, mutes, stools, keys, drum manufacturers, drum sizes, the bowls, heads, pedals, gauges, counter hoops, tension rods, struts, spiders, casters, protection for the drums, transport, and buzzes, rattles, and other irritating noises. So, did I pretty much cover it all, Damion?
Pretty much.
Well, we'll add things as we go if necessary. So, we're going to do this in 15 minutes, right? Okay, that ain't going to happen. So, tuning devices, which include a pitch pipe, electronic tuner, tuning fork. Right off the bat, I'd say scratch the pitch pipe. To any young aspiring timpanist, you want to develop your ear. And by having a pitch given to you by this device, you don't learn your intervals as soon, as well, or as in depth, I would say.
Yeah, I think the other issue too is, well, you're making sound,
right,
which is an issue, and then blowing into it, the pitch isn't pure until there's enough air going through it, so you can get a false read.
Yeah, so just don't use it. Electronic tuner, I would say that's fine if you're tuning up your drums, and that's what you need to do to fine tune and clear the head. But for just overall tuning, whether you're in rehearsal or performance, I think the gold standard is just a tuning fork. Whether you use an A for an orchestra, use a B flat for wind ensemble, whatever. That way you develop your pitch, your relative pitch, intervals, et cetera, which I consider necessary for a timpanist. Very
much so.
So our next area would be mallets. And it's so different now from when I was a student. When I was a student, there were perhaps 4 or 5 major manufacturers. Now there's got to be at least 50.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, especially between the Japanese market and the U.S. market and the European market.
Yeah, and it's definitely what you like is a personal thing. You know, it starts with you. It is then evolved perhaps with the conductor or conductors you're working with, what they like. And I would go a step further and say it's the style or era of music that you play. You know, if you're basically doing Baroque style, I think you don't need very many mallets there. You know, maybe a wooden pair and then a chamois covered, that might, maybe a third option there. That's probably would do it. But with the rest of us that do a wide variety, I think it's to your benefit to have a diverse sets of mallets. And I got that from my teacher, Mitchell Peters. He had just about every manufacturer. Maybe that you might think that would be a little bit overdone, but you know, I don't think any particular manufacturer covers it all, personally. That's why I also, like my teacher, have different manufacturers and pick and choose from them. So
Yeah, mine vary greatly, especially if I'm recording or if it's a smaller orchestra or if it's a big orchestra. The rep, the hall. And, then there's the other variable too, is some of these mallets are really designed around a specific technique,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
So if you're approaching more of a German, school, something, a heavy mallet is not going to be conducive to that,
Yeah.
you know.
And
So,
I thought you were going to say with what type of head you use, because that's another big factor, which at the professional level, it's standard to use skin head, calf skin, or
yeah,
goat, whatever. I would say before that, perhaps you're fortunate to have that type of head in your university's conservatory. Some of them do, but I would say most do not, and it's mainly because of the cost. They're very expensive, but without a doubt, that's the sound. That's the sound you want to go for. And we will talk a little bit more on heads a little bit later, but the head in conjunction with you, the player, and the mallet can really determine the sound. Of course, then we're not mentioning either the drum, which we'll talk about a little bit later. They
yeah,
all factor into it along with the space that you're in,
yeah.
etc.
It's a big equation. It's what you're
Right,
laying out there.
right. And
You
that's
know,
what you need to be aware of, that it's not just, oh, I'll just use this mallet. Maybe it's the way you're playing. Maybe you can snap a little bit more to get a more articulate sound, or you need to relax a little bit more to get a more legato sound. And what helps is if you have a friend that can go out and listen as you
yeah.
play and communicate to you the difference in the mallets you choose, the position on stage, the type of heads you use. And again, we'll get into more of this with the specifics, but you'd be surprised how it sounds different the further you get away. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, with that, the style of the mallets all make a difference, whether it's a ball head, a cartwheel, the handles, wood, bamboo, which is lighter, graphite, aluminum, etc. You have so many to choose from. And what the heads and the cores are made of, whether it's wood, felt, flannel, leather, etc. So we're talking about maintenance and care. So I think it's easy to say whatever your mallets come in, you should save them, maybe the plastic bags, and make sure the heads at least are covered.
I've noticed it's a lot of people aren't doing that anymore. I guess it's just the time when the rehearsal's over, they just want to throw everything in a bag or in a case or something and go. But
That's why
I
we're doing this podcast. We
I
want to
feel strong
reverse
about it.
that. It's going
Yeah,
to save them some money in the
a
long run.
lot.
Your mallet's in your bag rolling around or whatever, and there's all these type of moths and insects that can get in there, and you'll see little holes in your mallets eventually if they're not kept dry and away in a place where no insects or things can get into. So,
Yeah. It takes time to break a mallet in, and then it's like, how long can you make that last before you have to rewrap it or send it to be rewrapped? Or,
yeah.
the other thing you can use is like a sandwich bag just to cover the heads. I mean, it can be that simple.
Yeah. And of course, you want a mallet bag or stick case, whatever that is efficient and works. And obviously, you don't need to carry all of your timpani mallets if you have 50 or 60 pairs. But, obviously, you need to take options to rehearsals because your choice may not be the conductor's choice, and or someone out listening might let you know that that's not working. So, have a mallet bag that will carry a fair amount of mallets, and perhaps your music can fit in there, your electronic tuner and a tuning fork or two, etc. Your accessories, which we're going to get into that also. And then the last thing in this area is to have a mallet rack, a table, or a music stand, which the music stand is the most easy one to do with a towel. Just drape the towel on the music stand and there's your mallet stand. But the options are up to you, what you prefer. Many use the mallet racks. The problem that I have with the mallet rack is certain mallets don't work. If it has a small head, it doesn't quite work on the mallet rack. So
Yeah, and sometimes the really quickly changing, like that doesn't work.
yeah. My introduction to this goes back how many years? Maybe not 60, 50. When I saw Bill Kraft playing with the LA Phil, he had a mallet rack that attached to the music stand where he basically used a fiber board
Yeah, fiberboard, and you
and
cut
he
holes in
had
it.
holes drilled out and they were the right size, and he had all of his mallets. And what was most impressive to me, not then as a student, but now I see, you never need to take your eye off of the conductor. You know,
Everything's in front of you.
everything's right in front of you. I don't see that anywhere. I guess somebody does make that, but I don't see that anywhere.
I don't think I've never seen it anywhere else. I have a picture he gave me of him playing with that on his music stand, and it's pretty ingenious.
It works. So
Yeah.
all right, so let's go on to mutes. Same thing. We have a lot of manufacturers with mutes. Maybe not as many as mallets, but many do. And obviously, you can actually just make them fairly easily yourself.
Definitely.
And you just try different material, try different weight. Whatever works, make sure the cord that you use does not buzz when it's on the head. So whatever material that needs to be. But this is something that every timpanist should have, whether they're already attached to your drums but have extra set in your stick bag. When you go to a gig and you're using other drums, you might need the mute. So I would say it's a necessity.
Yeah. And if you go to a fabric store, you can find a million options. Fleece is great. Sham is great. I've seen like a sheepskin felt. You know, even like your timpani rewrapping felt, you can make something out of that. Like, there's a lot of options.
Yeah. All right, stools. For me, it's kind of an easy thing. I highly recommend everyone use a stool. Even if you're not playing, you can have the stool to sit, to rest. I recommend you sit and play, but that's a personal thing because you're going to have to sit and play when you have to do a lot of pedaling with both feet and you're already sitting down. I like the comfort of having that. I like a backrest. I like for it to swivel. I like for it to be height adjustable too. But that's my preference. I would say this is to your advantage to, number one, be comfortable and to be able to move around in that way.
Very much so. I've played on a lot of different ones. You know, I'm very partial to the Rock and Sock because it's made so well.
Uh-huh.
And they are really good about keeping replacement parts. I've played on others and they don't work right, especially for tall people. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really, I don't know how else you would play the instrument.
Yeah.
You would just hurt yourself.
Right.
So.
And I'd say for those that are rather short too. If you're in the middle, you could probably go either way, which I would still recommend you sit. But if you're very tall, very short, you're going to have to use, I think, a stool. Obviously, one of the things that you want to have is it's going to be easily portable. So the more sophisticated, the more parts there are on it, the heavier it is and the less easily portable it is. But you know, you got to weigh the differences. What's going to help you perform the best? I think that's the number one choice to go with.
And be comfortable. Like being able to be at rest and relaxed, not tense or contorted.
Yeah. Another accessory we have to have is a drum key. We have to have the keys, obviously, to the drums we're using. You know, whether it's Adams, Yamaha, Ludwig, Majestic, American Drum, et cetera, et cetera. With each manufacturer, obviously, they should send you keys when you purchase drums. If you don't, you just need to get them. That's a necessity.
And you can find them used online.
Very good. So that would take us to the different drum manufacturers, of which there are many, many, many. I'll just read a short list of some of the ones that I just thought up. And this is in no particular order. And there might be a mispronunciation with a certain French model, which I'm going to do my best and say Bergeau. I don't know if that's right, but anyway, I'll start with that. There's Ludwig, Slingerland, Leedy, Premier, Yamaha, Adams, American Drum, Hartke, Ringer, Hinger, which is like Ringer but with an H, Goodman, Majestic, Lafima, etc.
Yeah.
Any ones in particular that I missed, Damion, or did I do a pretty good job?
Colburn makes a set of timpani.
Oh, Kohlberg. Yes.
Kohlberg,
German.
yeah.
Yes.
They make multiple different sets of drums. And
yeah.
Dorfler. I saw a set of those come through. They were, I was asked to work on. They were well made. And then there's the Viennese drums.
Mm-hmm.
Schneller and the Wiener, right? I think that's, I'm going to mess that.
It's the Vienna timpani, Viennese Pauken, And I think in all the names we mentioned, there is a wide price range there.
Oh, yeah.
Of what you can get for, let's say you're starting with a pair. So it's really where you're at. Are you a beginner? Are you an intermediate? Are you about to enter the profession? You're a studio player, etc., etc. They all make different models also. Some that are easily portable, whether that's called universal or not, and some that are meant to stay on a stage, meaning there's no casters. If you're not familiar with that type, basically where a caster would be is nothing and or just a hole that you screw, I would call a spike into, and it goes really into the stage, maybe not deep into the stage, but it's really a great concept because the resonance from the drum, therefore, now is connected to the stage directly, and it enhances the sound. So this is at the top because drums like that don't get moved very often. But I think most of our listeners will not be using that type of a drum at this point. That's towards a career where, you've got a gig. You've got a good orchestra gig. And maybe you get the orchestra to buy a set of drums like that for you.
And those drums can often be heavy.
Very heavy. Yeah.
They can get very, very heavy.
Which changes the sound. Again, you get a deeper, richer sound, especially if you're playing on a wooden floor that is resonant, that's not I don't want to say concrete underneath it, but a box. Therefore, the sound that you create goes through the floor and again resonates into the hall. So those are great situations to be in for a certain type of repertoire,
Yeah. This has become a bigger thing for me because I get to see a lot of instruments. I get to work on them, and I've really take a lot of consideration into which companies are very good about stocking parts, replacement parts for extended amount of time. I think that's becoming more of a consideration for, of who prioritizes their availability of parts. If these are drums that are getting moved a lot, where there's potential of damage, and the more you move it, the odds are going up. Some universities, it's like they have to move drums across campus, right? Like that's just as hard on the instruments.
Yeah.
So, keeping things like having stuff like the original casters accessible, not having to retrofit the instrument to try to keep it functioning is very valuable. I'm also kind of a purist with I really like to try to keep the instruments original as long as possible.
Right. Yeah. Let's move on to kettle sizes. And this has changed over the years. I guess around 1978 or so. That's when there seemed to be a shift from, let's say, the middle two drums being 28, 25 to 29 and 26.
Yeah.
I think they didn't make as a part of their standard set much larger than 30 or 31. Now it's 32. And the 28, 25 is now 29 and 26. And the 23, I think, has been the same throughout all the years. And whether you want to call a piccolo 20-inch a standard size, that's pretty much been the same.
Yeah.
So it's good to know the numbers. It's good to know where they've come from because there are older drums that will be different from the standard that we have now. We also need to mention there are custom sizes. Custom drums are not typical, whether it's a 35-inch or a 21 or an 18. But there are kettles that come in various sizes, and the manufacturers probably would make it for a premium price. That's what they're in the business for.
Yeah. It's really good to be able to play on these different drums to really understand what is changing and why. I find that fascinating. The bigger size drums, they just move a lot more air. And in some situations, I really prefer a smaller drum, especially some of these pickup orchestras that just, it's nice and clean, but it's not a big sound.
Yeah.
So there's benefits to those older sizes having options. I guess what I'm saying is learning the finer details of what these different sizes mean is very valuable information. And then there's also the issue of then what size do all these heads need to be for these different size drums? Because that changes too.
We'll get to that when we talk about heads, which is coming up soon. So know what sound you're going for, know what size ensemble you have. When you're a young player, you'll take whatever.
And then there's also the extended collar thing.
Right.
How much that changes the sound of the instrument. It's significant.
It is. Yeah. All you have to do is put one beside the other, one that is a standard not extended collar and one that does, I think you'll hear a difference in the resonance and maybe a little bit more focused pitch, possibly, depending on how they're tuned.
And how
bigger
open
sound. Yeah.
Just how resonant they start to get.
Yeah. And some of that's not needed in the studios, actually, because you're on a microphone. So, it depends on your application, what you're using these for. If you're loading them up and using them around town in various gigs, maybe that smaller size is going to make it easier for your transport, too. So, again, these are some of the options. You guys decide what's going to work for you. Okay, bowls. Basically, two different types of bowls, as in the material, basically copper, which is typically the preferred, and you can get that in smooth or hand hammered. But also to mention that copper is at a premium these days, and it has been for a while. So be careful where you leave your drums, because they might be taken and stripped apart and sold for the copper, because copper prices, you just got to keep up with the commodities market, Damion. You just got to keep up with stuff like that.
It's really expensive.
You might want to sell some of your drums that have just been sitting there for a while before the price of copper goes down. But seriously, the other option is the fiberglass, which I think we would all say they don't sound as good. They don't sound the same.
Resonant.
But we would all say they're a hell of a lot lighter to lift.
Oh, so yes.
That makes a difference.
And I'll add too, I remember running across a set of drums that were aluminum bowls, which was very interesting.
Wow. Who's the manufacturer of those? Do you remember?
It was Pearl.
Ah,
They were
really?
old Pearl drums, not Adams.
Right.
They have, the relationship now. These were Pearl drums. Yeah. They all functioned very well.
Yeah.
And everything was there. It's just aluminum sound was very different. It wasn't as resonant. It was a clear pitch, but it wasn't big, It was interesting.
There's something about the copper, it resonates with the pitches we play, obviously.
And it gives a color, it gives an energy that is,
Yeah, so that's our preference, that's our recommendation. And then another point would be whether the bowls are suspended or they're not. I'll just say not, as in the strut, which we'll talk about also, is bolted to the bowl. It changes the sound. It mutes the sound. Anything that touches the bowl is going to affect the sound.
Yes, in every way. I've seen a lot of different variations. And now they make those portable drums. And everything is attached to the bowl. I hear a very different sound from those drums.
Yeah.
They're great because they're portable.
Right.
I give it all respect in that.
Yeah.
And the fact the bass comes off so you can fit it in a car. And that's very valuable. But you start to hear different things. And then there's also some manufacturers make the bowl and then attach a steel ring on the inside that is the bearing edge. So it's not the bowl that comes up and creates a bearing edge. It's a separate piece. You can hear the difference between those drums.
Yeah. And then speaking of the bowl and the shape of the bowl definitely affects the sound, whether it's rounded at the bottom, so to speak, or it's rather flat. My ears, I believe the flat bottom has a darker sound. I would associate it with the German sound, where if it's more rounded, perhaps doesn't have quite that darkness to the sound. Maybe it's a little bit more articulate, possibly. But just be aware that they come in different shapes.
Very much so. And those really create different colors.
And different depths also.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because some of them are rather shallow.
I've seen some very shallow.
Yeah.
But again, this is part of that equation thing where there's benefits. There's a place for these things.
Yeah.
You see old Baroque drums, and some of them are shallow, and it fits that music. It can fit that very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't, that wouldn't work for Mahler.
So, the bottom line is you have all these options, and where do you draw the line? Say, okay, I've got 3 sets of timpani.
Oh, gosh.
I'm not going to purchase another set because blah, 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 whatever. And to have that is a luxury. But I would say playing in a major symphony orchestra, it's a must. The variants in the repertoire that we play, everything from Baroque to what's written today. So you might want a different sound. I would want a different sound depending on the composition. So
yeah, it's different tools and knowing how to use your tools.
Yeah.
And knowing really how to fully manipulate them, to get all these different ideas, colors, sounds.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Now I'm going to hit on your expertise now. We talk about care and maintenance. That's what this program's about. So what do you do with a bowl that is out of round?
Yeah.
Oh, you answered it right away.
This is tricky. And I've done some stuff that is maybe very unconventional simply because there's nothing to lose at some point, right? Like not so long ago, I found a set of drums that were very out of round and I was able to get them for a very cheap price. So it felt like I had very little to lose. At the worst case, I would just end up buying new parts. So the hoops were out of round, the bowls were out of round. The support ring was out of round, and I took the drums apart and I got some vices and squished them the opposite direction and held them there until they bent back into place.
Yeah.
I got it down to a 16th out of round, which that was where I was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they're very good. They're not perfect.
But it improved.
Significantly.
Ah.
Again, I went from probably being I was more than an inch out of round on some two of the drums. And I got it down to less than a 16th. Right?
So meaning that one bearing edge to the complete opposite side, let's say it was 32 inches. And then if you make a cross and do from one bearing edge to the opposite, it might have been 31, something like that. Yeah. That's out of round. That's getting closer to an egg shape.
It was an egg.
Yeah.
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 That's the thing with our instruments. We would think when we purchase a new set of drums or a new drum, whatever, perfectly round, the bowl, the counter hoops perfectly round, all the mechanism works perfectly, but that's not the case. I know the manufacturers allow for a little bit of variance here and there.
Where does it end? And especially now where you can get machinery that can get it very, very fine. You can get it down to the 10,000ths. But then will it stay too? Right? It gets complicated because this is something that's flexing and being pulled on and used and moved.
So then I would ask, they've probably experimented over the years, whether it's the centuries, with the thickness of the bowl.
Oh, yeah.
I would think the thicker, the more stable it would be, and the thinner, perhaps more or less stable. But they have to find a meeting point where you can only make it but so thick and it will get too heavy.
Too thick, too heavy, not as resonant, you could argue.
Okay.
Because it's too thick. But the other variable in this is, we're talking about copper, which is a very soft metal. In all of the professional drums, that soft metal, it's set on a ring that's usually steel, and that needs to be very round.
I see.
So the bowl is gonna flex
Yeah.
because it's a soft metal. Like you take it out of the drum and you lay it down, and it's not going to be round. And you put it in the hoop that it sits in, and that is what creates the roundness.
Yeah.
So I've seen drums that are very, the bowls that are very thin. Like you can put your finger into it and push it, and the whole thing just moves.
Wow.
And I've heard drums that are like that sound really great.
Okay.
And then I've heard other drums that have thicker gauge that sound great too. This is to me where you get to where you're creating small changes.
Yeah.
This is where we're talking about the tip top.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of putting your thumb and pressing in and having it move, let's talk about dents with our maintenance here. So it happens. Give us a short take on dents.
Yeah, they come out very easy. I like to use like auto body tools. So there's a hammer and then there's an outer form that you put on the outside. So you hammer it to the form and you can put a rag around that so you don't scratch up the bowl. You don't go to the middle and push that out. You work the outside into the middle and you move it slowly until it comes back out and is flat. Mm-hmm. The thing you don't want to do is move too much too fast. That's where you start to see a stress mark. Sometimes you can't avoid the stress mark if the dent is too big. You just move it slowly.
Yeah.
But moving it slowly is the important part, and it's from the outside in.
So these are purely cosmetic. Would you say they don't really affect the sound?
I've not been able to really tell, except for when the drum was very dented. I've seen some drums that were like they didn't have struts, so the whole bowl was exposed. They were in bad shape.
Well, at that point, Damion, I'd say change it to a hand-hammered kettle. You know,
That's what this one became.
that's easier to do instead of taking out so many dents in there. So, all right, let's move on. Let's move the heads. Very important aspect of the sound we achieve on our drums is the type of head that's on the bowl, whether it's plastic or calf, whether it's an Evans, Remo, or whatever. When to change the head is very important. And you can check out program notes, and I'll have a how to change, how I do it. It's not how you have to do it, but if you've never done it, maybe it'll be very helpful to have a guide like that. So let's start with plastic versus calf, which we've hit on a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Calf is for the ideal situations. The humidity is it's an outstanding training tool, especially because you have to be so focused on the pitch. It's going to move and it's going to change. Plastic is by all means the norm, and then what kind of plastic? I think that really comes down to a lot of your training and what the lineage of teachers you come from and what they like to use and how they like to manipulate the sound of the heads.
Yeah, with the calf, the best overall sound. And like you said, it changes with the weather. So to those that have not had the pleasure of playing, when it's rather arid, very dry, the calf gets a bit brittle and it gets tight, just like your skin might. Or just picture the desert floor, And then you'd need to put some moisture into the bowl, whether it's in the hole in the bottom of the timpano, dampen a sponge, wring it out, and stick it up with a string so you can pull it out afterwards.
Yeah.
So that there's moisture in there, and that will help a bit. On the opposite end, if it's very humid, you're going to have a problem with the pitch going down constantly because the head is constantly taking in that moisture, which makes the pitch go down. Relaxing, yes. Yeah. So the opposite, if you'd like, you can find a high watt light bulb and stick that up through the hole in the bottom of the timpano. And if it produces enough heat, it will dry up the head a bit. So that's a couple of things you can do. And I think what Damien's saying is that it takes a lot more care than if you just have plastic, which I have found that it does, in fact, change with weather. Not nearly as much, but in my years of playing with the fill at the Hollywood Bowl, we're basically out and open to the elements. So if it's a hot and humid evening, the heads would not stay from, let's say, the beginning of the performance to the end.
Yeah.
Humidity, I don't think, affects them quite as much as temperature definitely affects the plastic, not as nearly as much as the calf. So, but, it's our job as timpanists, no matter what type of head, what conditions are, where you're in a hall or you're outside, you've got to be aware of your pitch all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're always play absolutely imperfect, but you got to make the adjustments as needed. So one thing I'd say, keep your feet on the pedals because you never know what that next sound's going to be until you hit it. And then you'd better make that adjustment. So then in selecting heads, and let's go back to the plastic now, there are a variety to choose from. And Remo offers a clear head that you can basically more or less see through and an opaque. Does Evans not offer that also?
From my understanding, they have two. It's a white, the orchestral, and then they have the strata, the skin-colored one.
Okay. And which one do you go for? It's which one that you prefer the sound. In the custom Remo heads, they offer insert ring, which I would say we both recommend those. It adds stability to the head because the counter hoop's going on top of that. And if there's any weakness around the head, this helps to fortify and keep it consistent. So,
and I'll take it one step further. It creates more stiffness in the head. If there's any inconsistencies in the hoop, it helps make up for that. And then there's one other part in that it lifts the head down a little bit because it sticks up above the collar. And this makes a big difference. On some drums, when the head goes past the hoop and then over the bearing edge, the head can hit the hoops, and that dampens the sound, the resonance of the drum. So I find that that's an added thing with the inserts. And then they have the tall insert compared to the short insert.
Right.
So it matters on the kind of drum.
Yeah. So you do need to be aware that the counter hoop will sit higher on your head when you have the taller insert versus the shorter. And you might need to maybe you raise your stool a bit because you don't want to be making rim shots, and because it does affect that. But all of these little things make a difference in the production of sound and what our goal is. And I didn't mention this earlier, but resonance. You want as much resonance as possible from your drums. At least I do. I think that's a good problem to have versus they sound rather dead and they can be used on Baroque and maybe early classic, but that's it. I'd rather have drums that ring a lot and I can adjust with mutes or whatever, with whatever means to make them less resonant, as opposed to that's just the way they sound. So these little things make a difference. So we need to talk a little bit about fine tuning. That's a part of the maintenance and or clearing a head, because once you have a head on a drum, and perhaps your first introduction will be on a drum that has had a head on for a while, way too long. And maybe something that would improve the sound would be just this process of clearing the head. Well, first of all, if your ear is a little bit more advanced, you'd be able to hear the differences of the pitch at the tension rods. And any difference, I like to take up the lower ones rather than bring down the higher one. So this is a process. It's not easy, let's say, at first, but I think it's like practicing. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the more your ear will develop. If not, definitely ask your teacher or ask someone that has some experience. And if you're still stuck, maybe you might think twice about playing timpani, because seriously, you need this type of an ear to be able to detect very slight differences in pitch so that you can have a great sound on your drums. That's something you need to do constantly. It's not like a thing you do, you put on a head, you clear it, and then it's good. You put on a head, you clear it, then you stretch it, and you play on it, and then you clear it again, because it's going to change. Especially a new head will stretch constantly until it's broken in, and then it will still stretch, but not much at all. But the initial break-in process requires this TLC and adjusting, because the plastic head and the calf will acclimate itself to the bearing edge much more easily than the plastic. The plastic is just plastic. So, but you still have to clear a calf head. But just don't think that you clear it once and it's good till you change that head. It will continually change. In particular, the beating spot will go flat over time because you're beating on it. It's going to stretch there. So stay on it.
That's well said. I also like to preference it that, like, if you spent the first 5 minutes of your practice session just tuning the drums, going over them, if you just do that every day when you practice, it's just going to get easier and faster, and you're going to find issues quicker. You'll be able to resolve them faster. It's just practice. Do that on all 4 drums, and if you do that every day, you're going to get good at it.
Yeah. Or just pick a drum each day. You know?
Yeah.
And like we say with practice, the best way to do this is slowly.
Oh,
just
boy.
move or turn the tension rod just a bit and see if you hear a difference. Turn it more, see if you take your time with it. But like Damion said, just do it every day. 5 minutes.
But don't go crazy either. Like, this isn't a half an hour process.
Yeah.
This is, 5-10 minutes and move on.
Yeah. And maybe this is where we introduce the electronic tuner, because that will tell you pretty much what you're hearing at each rod. So maybe that's something to implement as you're doing this. And maybe over time, your ear will hear what you see. As in, the percentage is always high here, then you start hearing that because it confirms that. On the other hand, something like a drum dial, I don't recommend. I have found that using it on a timpani, I've done that maybe a couple times, and when I'm finished with what the drum dial says, the head is clear, it doesn't sound clear to me. So I go and mess with the head on my own, and then it sounds better. So
the drum dial is measuring pressure at each of those spots. That's not pitch. It's the pressure. It's making the same pressure across the drum. So it's like you can get close fast, but you can't get them to the same pitch because it's not measuring pitch. It's measuring tension. It's two different things. It can be a valuable tool to help pull things in quickly and close, but it's not going to get the head to be exactly the same pitch all the way around the drum.
yeah, I don't think it's worth the $75-$80, so I just toss it. So, but that's just me.
Well, you've also changed a ton of heads, and you have a process that worked really well before this tool, right?
Yeah. So the point is, it might be helpful in someone that doesn't have the experience to get them in the area of clearing the head. Very good point, along with the electronic tuner. All right, pedal mechanisms. So let's start with no pedal. You've got a kettle, but there's no pedal attached to it. What's going on here? Well, it might be that was intentional, that there's no pedal.
They're broke, Raynor.
Well, because there wasn't a lot of pitches going along. You didn't really need to change that much, so you didn't have a pedal. Of course, the pedal we're talking about, Baroque timpani made back then, they hadn't thought of making a pedal at that point. So things have to happen in a process. So first, the drum or the skin of the damn animal that just got slaughtered was stretched across with leather strap, or maybe the skin of the animal itself, just all the way around the kettle itself. But anyway, to fast forward, it eventually got a little bit more sophisticated, where, again, it's basically that, but with tuning keys around it. Sometimes there were only 5 or 4 or really odd numbers. They had to figure that out. But anyway, we'll just call these Baroque style timpani because that's where we started. Coming off of horseback in the military, we got dropped into an orchestra with the trumpets, and this is what we did. This is what was written for us at that time. So that's the Baroque series. And when you do need to change pitch, you've got to have a method of turning those knobs or whatever is on your style of drum and getting it ideally for us clear as possible, as in a clear pitch. But I don't think that happened probably in those days. They did whatever. And I think the pitch changed, but it wasn't a clear resonant pitch that we have now, I think.
I don't disagree. And I think the heads were thicker and less consistent, the thickness consistent, like the process of preparing the heads were not as consistent as we have now. It leans more towards a drum sound than a resonant timpani pitch.
With a clear pitch, yeah. So one other type drum that will not have a pedal is the chain or cable style drum, which I in my mind, it's meant as an auxiliary. It's not to be necessarily your regular set of 4. I know there's a different school of thought, like through the Saul Goodman school, where it's meant to be the lowest and the highest drum. And I think that's an exception. But in most of other areas of thought, I think this type of drum is an auxiliary. So let's say you need an extra G on the low end. Maybe you'd put it in between drums 1 and 2. If drum number 1 is 32, number 2 is 29, you'd put maybe a 30-inch chain or cable drum in between those outside of your half circle and have that on occasion. Because I've seen Bill Kraft, for instance, I'll use his name again, do that in the Copland Third Symphony. I remember he had a couple of chain drums out for that, and very cool. And then you'll get some that are very small, let's say 18, 19, 20 inch, et cetera, et cetera. But in general, that's what's happening with a drum that doesn't have a pedal. And the next is a crank. It might have a crank instead of a pedal. And one advantage of a crank is that it's more easily portable because the legs can go basically, you can either take them off or you can push them up. Just don't go up too far because it might hit the head. But they're more easily portable than a drum that has struts on the side and, et cetera, et cetera.
And what you were doing here is as a progression in the ability to tune the drum, retune the drum quicker, right? So we have T-handles on each thing. We're trying to bring up to a pitch that's going to take a minute. If we now have a chain drum, We have two handles, and we turn those two handles, and it turns the chain, which brings the whole drum up, right? That's quicker. Now it's a crank, and that brings the head, right, the hoop down, and we're getting quicker, right?
We're
and
getting there.
Yeah.
No Bartok yet.
I've seen people on crank drums play Bartok, and it's pretty. Oh boy. They have a system down, they know.
Make sure they oil that crank before they get going.
It's really impressive.
Let's not forget the maintenance part. Is there any particular maintenance that you recommend for, let's say, first the Baroque and then the chain style drum?
Well, the Baroque will most likely have calf or goat on them. So simple things like when you're done with the drums, bringing them down in pitch so that you're not going to mess up those heads. The care for those drums is kind of minimal because there's very little mechanics on it, right? Each lug could use a little bit of oil on occasion.
Yeah. And the less mechanics, I think, is the beauty of the drums. It's a pure sound of a drum without a lot of other stuff that goes with tuning,
Yeah. And there's a real beauty of learning how to play those drums, like getting the most in playing musical on something so primitive, maybe you could say, or so simple.
Yeah, so basic. It's a drum with a head on it,
Yeah.
Yeah. No gauges, no pedals, no fine tuner, just yeah.
It's like a stick and a head
stick
in
a drum.
Yeah. Right? Like,
yeah.
It's kind of, I really enjoy that. But yeah, there's minimal to do.
Yeah.
We have a little bit more chain or cable drums. We have a little bit more mechanism, and it's really not that much more. It's just lubricating the parts that move, caring for the head.
You mentioned Marshall Light earlier with American Drum, and they made some chain, right? It wasn't cable.
Chain drums.
And I believe you tell me that they developed a system where you don't have to take all of the tension rods off of the chain drum to change the head?
Of all of the systems I've seen of chain drums or cable drums, theirs is by far the best. You can change a head without having to take everything off. You can fine-tune the drum without having to take the chain off. You can access everything and take care of everything you need without a huge hassle.
Right.
Yeah. They're great. I have one, and they're by far the best.
So anything special about the crank drum other than obviously lubrication on the crank?
Yeah. The other thing, too, is you need to keep some tension in that handle. Usually there's a leather gasket and something to increase tension on the bar that runs down the side of the bar. There has to be some tension in that. Like you can't lubricate that because then the drum won't hold pitch.
Very good. The next one would be the post, which you use your toe and your heel. I don't know exactly when that was developed, but I would say it's probably over 100 years ago, early 20th century, my guess with that.
That's related to the Berlin style pedal. Mm-hmm. It's not a clutch in post, which, it's a heel and the leg movement.
Yeah.
Rather than the ankle movement.
Right.
So the Berlin style pedal for sure is along that lines. And then, they developed that into a clutch and post, which is a post that locks into place with a clutch, and you release it with moving the pedal forward, and then you move the whole thing with your leg up and down.
Yeah, right. And to my recollection, that was in some of the Leedy and Slingerland basses.
Adams now makes a set of those.
Up to date, yes.
Premier had those on their drums. I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones you see the most.
Yeah. And then there's the balance action.
Yeah.
Where you can adjust the spring tension with the knob on the bass, and you've got to be in cohort with the range with the tension keys to balance it out. That's why it's called a balance action.
Which is exactly it. It's just like it's a scale. You have to even it out on both ends. There has to be equal tension from the head and the spring. And when those two things meet, the drum works the way it should be. If the head is too loose, then there's too much spring tension and it won't hold pitch.
Right. And that's what I get. Students will mention to me that, what's wrong with this drum, blah, blah, blah. It's been played on for years and the head's never been tightened. So it's out of range. You've got to have the head in range to balance with the tension on the spring, as you just mentioned.
Yeah. And one of the culprits in all of that is if the heads haven't been changed within a reasonable amount of time, they lose elasticity, and that just works against the idea of the spring giving counter to it.
Right. Yeah.
It's not, it's off. It's not going to be right.
And also in some of these, I guess it's maybe later models, later as in the last 40, 50 years, so it's not so recent, is I know with the Ludwig, they have a little pedal pressure adjustment where you can adjust the pressure that you feel on the pedal.
Ideally, you shouldn't have to use that. If everything else is in balance, you don't need that at all. I really think that was an idea that was put on by the designers to guarantee that these drums will work no matter what. So they can be out of range. You can tighten that up and it will create enough tension so it will hold pitch in wherever it needs to be. So I think it was, I assume that was the idea of it is these drums are going into schools and this is the way that they'll just work.
Yeah.
Period. So when I do work on those drums, I always release that.
I see.
I try to get the drum to work wonderfully without it, and that usually works the vast majority of the time.
Then we have the Dresden style pedal, which amazingly enough was innovated in Dresden. That's where the name comes from. And it's an ankle motion that you actually activate with the clutch system. You move your foot to the side to activate the clutch, and then your ankle then pedals up or down to get the pitch, and then you set the clutch back in, and it stays with the teeth on the clutch system.
So with all of these now, there's more mechanism, which means more lubricant, more...
We're into the mechanical age now of Timpani.
There's more care needed in all of these types of drums.
Yeah.
If it's grease in certain areas and oils in others, this consideration will make these instruments last for a very long time.
Yeah, compared to the previous, whether it's the Baroque timpani that went into the classic era, this is quite a jump forward for us. And then the composers then took advantage of that and started writing pitches changing, not just from movement to movement, but within a piece and eventually while you're playing. So this was a major step forward for timpani.
Yeah, this enables you to move, and your hands are free, right? So
you can still play.
You can play everything you need to play, and you can change pitch very fast.
Amazing. Yeah. And with this, we add a fine tuner.
Oh, yeah.
That helps with the calf head,
That's huge, period, in my opinion, but especially with calf. Yeah. So the idea of that is that you have a handle that it's basically the same thing as the crank timpani. It's just you also have a pedal. You have a crank and you have a pedal.
Yeah.
So you can use this crank to bring the pitch up ever so slightly. You can do a lot more than ever so slightly. You can come up a big amount if you need, but you can make small adjustments in the drum and keep the range at where you need it easily, which is the beauty of it, especially if it's on the player side. I've seen players where they'll nudge it with their knee while they're playing a roll.
Yeah. Now, I would say that gets into the next one, the Berlin pedal. So if you're using the Berlin pedal, it's not an ankle thing. It's the entire leg, your leg motion. And that actually makes easier because there seems like less pressure because now you have bigger muscles instead of just your ankle to change the pedal. Now you can use your entire leg. Well, you have to with this style. It also has the clutch and it also has a fine tuner, but your knees are right there, conveniently, right next to the fine tuners. And when I joined the Phil, we had a set of ringers, so I got used to that. I heard people talk about it, but when I joined the Phil, it's like, oh, okay, now I see. You kind of leave the handles straight out beside your knee. So if while you're playing, you don't want to pedal, you just kind of nudge the right knee a little bit and it will either lower or raise the pitch. So, and I don't recommend anybody do that, but that's a side thing, a side note to the Berlin pedal, which was, by the way, originated in Berlin. There you go. Another innovation somewhere around that time was tuning gauges.
Yeah.
Which, again, changed the whole story of what we do. And not that it's going to give you an exact pitch, but with all these tuning changes that we had or have now with this pedal mechanism, it's difficult to keep the pitch, like we say, thinking of playing on calf. in particular. Same thing on plastic, but it's much, much more so on the calf. So manufacturers came up with a type of gauge which can be connected in various ways, and having it attached to the pedal or having it attached to the head or whatever. But now we have the tuning gauge to deal with.
Yeah. And just for a visual of where you're at is helpful. Not to mention if you're playing another drum and having to retune while you're playing, you have some kind of guidance of where you're at, The different kinds of gauges and where they connect, I find it creates a little bit of differences, but nothing hugely significant. The ones on the higher end drums, the Philharmonic level drums, they usually attach to, I'm not going to be able to tell you the name of that part, but it's not attaching to the spider. It's not attaching to
the pedal directly.
Yeah. And those are usually, they're just made better, and they're a little bit more consistent. They move easier. I think the maintenance aspect of it is just keeping them lubricated and making sure that they don't rattle, which is a whole nother part of this. But
I like to think of learning on drums that don't have gauges is an advantage, because you're forced to use your ear. And like I said from the beginning, that's a required of a timpanist in my mind. That's my opinion. So, yeah. And then all of these added things, whether it's the pedal, the fine tuner, and now the gauge, they all add weight.
Oh, yeah.
The drums are getting heavier for all these good reasons. So let's move on, because we got a lot still to cover. And one is the counter hoop. That's in most drums, not in all drums. This is what actually pulls down on the drum head by means of the tension rods. So tell us a little bit about counter hoops and whether they're out or round and what can be done. And I've seen some that have moleskin on the inside. What is that all about, man?
Yeah. Especially on the lower drums, having moleskin underneath. If you have plastic heads and you have like insert rings, in the low range, the head will literally pull off of it and then it will rattle. So having moleskin between those two things will just get rid of the rattle.
Yeah.
It's a simple way of dealing with that. There's different types of counter hoops. There's like what they call L-shaped, which is the most common. So the head fits inside. Then there's square, that is just a square that sits on top of the head.
Right.
Those are stiffer. I see the benefits of that. It's also, those tend to sit higher, so it's easier to have a rim shot.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to with the insert ring. If you got the insert ring and this style counter hoop, you're almost guaranteed to have a rim shot or two every now and then. Yeah,
it'll force you to have good posture.
Yes, there you go.
You sit up straight and, they do get out of round. That is usually the first defense if a drum is bumped or something happens. It's usually the counter hoop that gets hit first.
Yeah.
So it's where the damage can live. You can straighten them out to a degree without some super fancy tooling, but you can only go so far.
To me, it's like a car that's been in a significant accident. Yeah, it can be fixed. It's just never gonna drive quite the same again.
It won't. I mean, that's just what it is.
Yeah.
Then there's two parts of that. It's out of round and it's out of flat.
Ah, yes.
Right. So there's two dimensions we're talking about there.
Right.
So if it's out of round and you push it back into round, you can push it out of flat.
Right.
So,
and that's just as bad because it's not applying equal pressure around the head.
Yeah.
And that's detrimental to everything we're talking about with clearing the head and getting that fixed focus pitch.
Yes, having it ideal. The tooling that's neat to be able to do that is, that's very specialized.
Yeah. But in most manufacturers, you can get a replacement counter hoop.
Yeah.
All right. How about the tension rods?
Yeah, there's a ton of variation in this from, the Philharmonic level drums that usually have very long ones that go down to the spider.
Which adds to the weight.
Which is weight.
I'm keeping track of the weight as we keep adding things.
Yeah. And there's variation in those too, where I've seen some that are aluminum and I've seen some that are steel.
I would think steel is better. Is that not necessarily so?
I think it's better for the weight. for the durability. And usually they're chrome plated too, which looks really nice. On balance action drums, they're usually very short because you're just trying to get far enough down into the strut.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And there's benefit to that too, because then there's very little room for the head or the counter hoop to shift. Once all of all the tension rods are in and they pull down a little bit, it kind of centers itself. Where on a Philharmonic drum, those long tension rod, you can push the head over and then pull it down and and screw it all up.
Yeah.
Right. So the head has to be centered. It has to stay centered, and you have to pull it down evenly because it can get set. It can get set offset.
Right. And that getting to another point we're going to get to in a bit. That's why for the Philharmonic style drum, when you're leaving the drum to set it on a high pitch, especially if you know it's going to be moved. So less instance of the head being shifted during movement. Yeah. High tension. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes complete sense.
And then we love to clean and lubricate the tension rods on occasion.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're chrome plated. You let them shine.
And then you were speaking of the struts. So depending on the model, the struts can suspend the bowl, which is important.
Yeah, the struts usually go up to a metal ring. They get attached to a metal ring that the bowl sits in. And, the struts also carry the rest of the linkage for the tuning of the drum. It's also a great protection. So on balance action style drums, if they get bumped into it, there is potential it could hit a strut rather than the bowl directly. You know.
How about the spider itself?
Yeah, and that varies so much.
Yeah.
From very large ones that the Philharmonic style drums will have, because you have to have a spread far enough that the tension rods can fit into.
Right.
To very small ones, like on the balance action, where it's just under the bowl. It's just a 4-inch round that everything connects to, and that's what's being pulled down to spread the pitch across all of the lugs. That can need lubricant just a little bit because it moves. So having that be able to move freely is very beneficial.
How about the casters? So, like I think I said earlier, some drums, the higher end, you don't even get casters. You're like, I paid, $10,000 each for a drum and there's no caster? Well, it's not about moving the drum. It's how the drum sounds. So that's why you're not getting a caster. The drums sound the best when they've never moved. They just sit on stage or in your studio or wherever. You'll find that they don't squeak, they don't leak, they don't do anything but sound great. But that's not realistic. So we put casters because they've gotten heavier,
Oh boy. And if you do need to move them a lot, it's a huge benefit. And then those drums that don't have casters, usually when they do have to move them, they pick them up and put them on a cart that has the casters. So there's a safe way of moving those when needed. Casters are a big one. That's probably the most wear on the instrument. So keeping those lubricated, keeping them clear of gook, and they have a tendency to pick up hair and stuff. So keeping all that stuff out of them and keeping them lubricated. I'm also a huge fan of total lockout casters in that the wheel gets locked and the swivel gets locked. It really helps a drum not shift on you when you're playing.
That's the worst. You're pedaling a involved part, and the drum is constantly moving away from you.
Oof.
Yeah,
stress.
Not good.
We don't need stress.
But I think it happens to all of us. We forget to lock the wheels, or the crew forgot to lock them, and we're playing, and oh my gosh. There goes the 26. Yeah, you can replace casters.
Yeah.
But speaking of moving, protection and the transport of our drums. I always think of anybody with their own personal instrument, not just percussion, but any instrument. Whether it's violinists, they tend to go for expensive but really good cases all around. And I think the same should be true for us. Not that we need an expensive trunk or anything, but everything we do, it's about our instrument. It shows how much you care about or how much you don't, from head protectors to a cover and some means of transport, whether it's a trunk or whatever method you have to really protect your babies, I would say, And like I mentioned earlier, for me, with the American drum timpani that I have, having the head tension set relatively tight to avoid any shifting of the head, lock the pedals, etc., just all go in line with, I really care about my drums. I want to make sure that I get the optimum sound from them because the sound I create is identified as Raynor. That's Raynor's sound, whether it's good or bad, And I want it to be good. I want it to be free of the buzzes and rattles that we'll talk about in a second. I want it to be a deep, rich, focused sound. So something as simple as protection and transport really makes a difference.
Yeah, and it's who's moving them, how they're moving them, and all of those logistics. I've played with orchestras where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to let you move my stuff because this is going to be frustrating. They also have shown themselves to not care. So, like, I don't want somebody that doesn't care moving my stuff.
Yeah. Well, their job is to move whatever off stage, from on stage to wherever, but they're not thinking necessarily of moving these person's personal timpani that cost them $60,000 from here to from place A to place B. We're just moving items, And I will say I was very fortunate with the LA Phil to have stage crew that cared about what I did and I care about what they do. I would give them the benefit of the doubt. They'd do the same for me. If I didn't have something on a list, maybe they'd ask, Raynor, did you forget yeah. Oh, good. They'd have my back and they would take care in what we do because they knew. Yeah. They knew to what extent my instruments and the Philharmonic's instruments meant to all of us, and to the whole section, not just me. So,
well, that's professionalism of the highest.
There you go.
It's not always. I've learned that's not always the case with caring for the instruments, having covers, putting them on when they're not being used, having the head protectors on because they will end up as tables. So anything you can do to help protect them. And that, they are big. They do take up a lot of space on stage. With regards to covers, there's lots of variations from very thin covers to very thick and heavy covers.
Depends on how much you want to spend.
Yeah.
It's a great investment. Starting with head protectors, you can just put cardboard, but it's a great investment in the long term. With the covers, if you just get a very light flim or what do they call half cover or whatever, go ahead, I would say, and get a full length.
Yeah.
With a zipper or a Velcro or whatever. And it's your instruments again. And what you do with your instruments, other people see and notice. So, the violinist can see that you're very picky about, so I'm not going to put my fiddle on his drum. It might get thrown or whatever. Well, no, but seriously, it's an extension of you, what you do with your instruments. So
yeah, how you handle your stuff. Yeah, how you care for your stuff.
Yes, it's easy to say to go ahead and spend the extra dollars, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at this as like, I bought these timpani and I would love them to last my career.
Right.
If you look at things more disposable, then okay. But
that's a good way to look at it. This is a long-term purchase. This is not just for the next 5 years or so. I mean, you can start off with a basic set, but I would say even with those, they're my babies still,
Yeah.
I want them to be as good, or if not better, than when they first arrive. So,
Yeah. And how can they be their best all the time until you sell them and buy another set, move up, right?
Yeah.
You'll just make more money off of selling it when they're great.
There you go. A good return. So you not only got to perform with them and you got paid for that, but then when you sell them, you'll get some of that back. Good. 100%. So everything we've talked about, Damion, leads to the last area. We've kind of covered it, but we have to go over it again because it all just comes together with the buzzes, the rattles, and the noises that we get, which for me are very irritating and disturbing. When I find one, I have to fix it because I don't want to hear any extraneous sound that comes from the instrument. But it's also interesting, too, thinking about this, as we've built the drums over the years, starting from Baroque to now, where they have all these fancy things, the tuning gauges, the fine tuner, the pedals. We've added more things that will vibrate. And what is our instrument meant to do? Vibrate. So it's like, I don't know if it's conundrum is the right name, but it's this thing that we've created, this monster we've created in a way where it's got all the bells and whistles, but the bells and whistles, metal on metal, is going to make a sound that we don't want. We want the sound of that head and the pitch from the head to come out. That's it. We don't want any buzzes, rattles, anything else. So I think you've hit upon it. You've got to keep lubrication in mind. You've got to watch and see where the metal is touching from the tuning gauge rod that's going down to the base, where the spiders are connecting. The casters are not vibrating in this way. There's a spring in the fine tuning handle or whatever. It's a lot. It's a lot. So you have to be good at diagnosing where is this sound coming from.
Yeah. And, when is it time to use a grease, which can help with some of those, help dampen rattles? When is it time to use an oil? I mean, I find it fascinating with your description if you look at the resonance of a Baroque timpani compared to a resonance of a modern drum, it's night and day, right? These drums are really vibrating. There's a lot of energy in them. If they're designed well, the potential for rattles should be minimized. But things like bolts loosening up, or it happens
due to playing the drum, because it vibrates when you play it.
Yeah. So checking those kind of things, having somebody play and just walk around and touch everything until you find what is rattling, find the issues. I've often found it revolves around the gauge, or the things that I've found when it does rattle. It's either the gauge. On a rare occasion, a head will pull out of the channel. And then when you pedal, it will creak. Casters will rattle. So making sure they're tight enough that they don't rattle, but that they can still roll comfortably. And it's just usually a loose bolt somewhere. Right. And then there's the magic. It could be the room.
Oh, yeah.
So I've had that.
Right.
Where it's like, where is this rattle? And no, it's the room. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I've had several occasions where, again, I'm with a student, and when they're pedaling, you hear this really crackly sound. And that is the case of the bearing edge. Whatever lubrication was there is now gone. And when you pedal, you hear this awful loud noise of a crackle, whatever. And, you just got to take the head off and relubricate the bearing edge with our famous Teflon spray.
The magic Teflon spray.
Yeah, there you go. Which I should have mentioned this earlier, and I'll just mention it now. Just make sure you check out the program notes. We'll have all specifications for things like that, recommendations on what to use for the lubrication, for the Teflon spray, for wax, so you have a nice shiny instrument that does not attract as much dust in the future, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you check out the program notes on our website for this. So all these different things factor into possible noises that are very disturbing for me when I play. So
right. All the pros spend a lot of time maintaining all their instruments.
Important.
It's kind of ridiculous how much gets put into that.
That's one step on becoming a pro. You care about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have tools that would be helpful to have available.
Excellent. So that will be on our program notes. So make sure you check that out. The list of tools recommended by Damion. And let me give you a brief summary of what we've discussed. And I would start with developing your ear for pitch and tuning. That's first and foremost. Make sure you're comfortable when you play. So use a stool. Be as diverse as the repertoire is with your mallet selection. And whatever drums you have, treat them as if they are special. Even if you don't think they are, treat them that way. They won't know otherwise. Make your goal maximum resonance. Many moving parts in timpani, so lubricate. Change the heads before you notice anything. And of course, what we just talked about, eliminate the buzzes, the rattles, and noises. And it helps to have, as Damion gave us, a nice list of tools. So, we are all unique in our approach. You are identified by your sound, which I said before. Make it memorable, in a positive way. And Damion, thank you again for offering your expertise and all of the behind-the-scene things that you do for ABOP. Much appreciated.
It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate being able to support you in your endeavors with this. It's important stuff you're doing.
That wraps up this episode, Timpani Maintenance Talk with Damion Frigillana. Make sure you check out the program notes for this episode on our podcast page on our website for additional detailed information, including an outline, recommended supplies, tools, schematics, and much more. ABOP is a nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible and any amount is welcome. You can check out our website at www.abop.us for information on how you can contribute. We would love to add you to our list of supporters and sponsors of our mentorship program. Our growing list includes the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation, Black Swamp Percussion, Cooperman, Freer Percussion, Innovative Percussion, In Sound Mallets, Majestic Percussion, Marimba One, Malatech, Remo, Sabian, Vic Firth, and Zildjian. Please follow our podcast and spread the word about ABOP. We greatly appreciate your support. I am Raynor Carroll, and we are the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, ABOP. Thank you for listening.